Happy Monday and welcome into another edition of the PHNX Sun Devils Show. I'm Anthony Totri, joined as always by the freckled Mamba behind the Mac, making all of the magic happen. Rubus is sending postcards. He is on vacation gearing up for the start of the college football season. So solo Totri with, again, the one, the only freckled Mamba in the sidecar today. We got Raymond, Emily, Robin, Parker here in the chat. Make sure you hit that like button, you hit the subscribe button, and you drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Again, a happy Monday to everybody in the chat. Parker kicking things off, saying just a whole different feeling in the air knowing ASU football is a little over a month away. Think about that, guys. We have almost made it. We are less than 35 days away from the start of the 2026 college football season. Arizona State plays a football game next month. I know it's, again, 30-ish plus days away, but thankfully, fall camp starts this week. So we'll be able to scratch that itch a little bit more now than we have been able to over the last several months. Again, really, really looking forward to it. Sharon's saying, gonna need Ghost to come back. And Rob says, is it true that if one of these 2022 players were eligible, they can't go to a different school if they hadn't entered the portal? Not sure I understand. Well, Rob, that is a great question to kick things off because that is, of course, what we are talking about today. The players for both ASU football and ASU men's basketball that can make a return to Tempe for one final season. But before we get into the players for each program, my official prediction of who comes back at the tail end of today's show, I do want to clarify the eligibility ruling for everybody because, like for Rob, there is a lot going on. Right? These things in college football, the college football rules and the Wild West that it has now become is all over the place, and it feels like every few weeks you get a new massive ruling in a court here, there, or anywhere that ultimately impacts the state of not just college football, but college athletics in general. So we can go ahead and clear up some of this eligibility ruling stuff. If you remember, the NCAA voted in June to completely overhaul eligibility for college athletics, beginning with future athletes, right? So the old system, as we know, used to be you get 4 years of competition, right, within a 5-year eligibility clock. You had red shirts, you had medical waivers, you had COVID years, you had hardship waivers, and a bunch of other waivers, right? They all made the system incredibly complicated for fans and for, honestly, I'm sure coaches and administrators to figure out who can play when. And ultimately, they decided with a new system, which I think for the most part, a lot of people, myself included, are in favor of the new system. The 5-for-5 eligibility rule, meaning that athletes now receive 5 seasons of competition within a 5-year period. Getting rid of the majority of the waivers, getting rid of, the whatever's left of COVID years, if there are still players working on that, red shirts, etc. Right? So you've got 5 to play 5. Now, again, the majority of those red shirts and waiver categories, they disappear because it's starting with new basic framework of college athletic eligibility moving forward. Now, again, this happened in June, right? So the timing is important here because the timing created the forgotten class of 2022. pretty much the class that just wrapped up eligibility. So they took it to court, and their argument for the most part was you changed the rules immediately after us, so why are we the only class that doesn't get to benefit from this whole 5 for 5? Now, one thing that needs to be abundantly clear, which I don't know if it was made clear by the court in the initial ruling, was the judge did not say that everybody gets another year. They didn't say that every former player can come back. They didn't say that roster limits disappear, that transfer rules disappear, that NIL rules disappear. Okay, that's something that is now clear, but I don't believe it was clear when this ruling came down Friday evening, and it did feel like, okay, this is, just the latest case of anybody in college athletics can do what they want, right? All of the former players from a year ago can all come back. They can all enter the portal, etc. There was supposed to be an emergency transfer portal period starting today. And I believe going through August 10th. So a 7-day period. And I believe this is somewhat still in order to an extent. What I mean by this is players that had initially entered the portal. This is back depending on what sport you were playing, whether it be football, basketball, etc. We all know they have their own portal window cycles. So if a player had entered the portal at that point in time, they can they can transfer to this point in time. If you are somebody, giving a name like Jordan Crook, for example, former Arizona State linebacker, he cannot transfer anywhere outside of Arizona State. These former players have to, in theory, come back to their school if their school will allow them to do so, right? Just because a player wants to come back doesn't necessarily mean that they are guaranteed a return to their school. There are so many different circumstances that play into it. I think Arizona State men's basketball is a great case, right? Arizona State men's basketball, by my understanding, has one open roster spot left, okay? But they can also now choose to add players via the portal. A player that was in the portal, or all of these class of 2022 guys that now want to make a final return for one final year of men's college basketball. Well, if they're in the portal, Arizona State can explore those players if they do not want to, return a former player on their team. So that's something to keep in mind. And just to kind of sum up the eligibility ruling for everybody that, again, because who knows how things will change here. I believe the NCAA has already filed, I want to say an injunction, going back to try and reverse this whole thing, as the NCAA has tried to do with a bunch of other court rulings. Brendan Sorsby, we're talking about you. So eligible athletes from the high school class of 2022 who exhausted their eligibility this past season can receive a 5th year. Now, it's subject to the rest of the NCAA rules and bylaws. The judge later clarified that the ruling does not eliminate those existing transfer rules, kind of what we just outlined. Roster limits stay the same. Revenue sharing caps stay the same, or allow athletes who signed pro contracts to return. Now, there are a couple of other things, right, pieces to this whole puzzle that still kind of need to be answered, right? Because kind of outlining the pro contract situation, I think that's pretty clear, right? If you signed a professional contract, you cannot return to college athletics, point blank, period. Now, there are NCAA rules and bylaws that state once you declare for a draft, right? You look at the NFL, for example. Once you declare for the NFL draft, you forfeit your eligibility. So with these players potentially coming back, let's say they haven't signed a pro contract, so they meet that standard, but they did declare for the draft. By my estimation, that is still a TBD on whether or not the declaration of a draft, whether it be NBA, NFL, or other, automatically removes you from getting this 5th year of eligibility. Again, things that still need to be outlined, things that still need to be discussed. Sharon has a question saying, if 2022 guys come back and they graduated, wouldn't they come back as grad students and then they enter the portal at any time, or are there still rules around that? Again, to my understanding, it doesn't matter if you graduated or not. You are still a part of the school that you wrapped up on. They aren't going to just allow people to transfer. There isn't that additional transfer portal window, only for players that had already entered the transfer portal. It's a good question, Sharon. I hope I answered it to the best of my ability. But again, some of these things are still kind of needing to be decided. This whole thing came down Friday. We got clarification on some things. I want to say late afternoon yesterday or evening yesterday. I imagine this whole thing will change a number of times before we actually get to the season. And again, there is, of course, the chance that they don't, right? That there isn't, the reality that these guys get their extra year of eligibility. Sharon says, but if they believe to be out of eligibility, that would influence that decision. I feel like that should be overwritten. It's certainly a decision that, is worth discussing, right? Whether or not they believe they were out of eligibility, etc. What they do not want to do is they do not want this to be another transfer portal window for everybody to just go get paid again, right? That's not necessarily what this whole thing is about in my mind. It's not, okay, all of the class of 2022 guys that you thought you had, you were out of eligibility and it didn't work in the NFL or it didn't work in the NBA or it didn't work in the MLB, come back, get drafted, or come back, enter the portal, and go get paid a bunch of money. That's not necessarily what this is all about in my mind. It's just to grant these guys one final year of eligibility. So again, we will see how these things change, how they evolve. It will certainly continue to change and evolve over the next several weeks. And for Arizona State, again, just to clarify, to my knowledge and my understanding, ASU men's basketball has a handful of players that in theory could return. They have one open roster spot, okay? ASU football, to my understanding, also has a few players that could make a return to Tempe in 2026. But from my understanding, I do not believe that Arizona State has any more roster spots available. I could be wrong on that. Okay, I think we'll get better clarification as the days move forward. But that would, in theory, mean that Arizona State, and the Sun Devils wouldn't be the only school, would have to consider cutting players to make that return to Tempe, which would be, that's an entirely different can of worms that I don't know if the NCAA is fully ready to get into with this whole situation of we're now a month away from the season and you could have universities cutting players to bring back other players. And then what does that mean? Do those players go into the portal? Do they just sign with anybody? What does that kind of look like, right? Taylor in the chat with a $5 super chat. Taylor, we appreciate that $5 super chat saying, Crook is a pro in the CFL, can't come back, but Jacob Kangaika, Rouser, Moe Odum all declare for the draft because they had no eligibility. This is true. Jordan Crook plays in the CFL. I still do not fully understand if because it is the CFL, right, it's the Canadian Football League, does that at all impact, can Jordan Crook come back and play in the United States, right? Does a professional league overseas still count when it is, when they're talking about professional leagues, professional contracts, right? So, to my knowledge, again, Jordan Crook is still potentially in the air when it comes to can he come back? If I'm making a guess early when it comes to Jordan Crook, I think he's got probably the longest odds to make a return to Arizona State. Again, considering he is playing in the CFL, it would be fantastic, but we will see. Will says ASU football used their last roster spot on the corner from Utah last week. They actually added 2 players to their roster. A corner, like Will says, I believe he was at a smaller school than Utah last year, but the year prior he was on the Utah roster. And then I want to say they added a player in the trenches as well. So yeah, their roster is pretty packed to this point in time. I don't know. We will for certain hear from Kenny Dillingham later on this week to hopefully get better clarification, not only on where Arizona State's roster stands, but also if Arizona State is considering adding players whether it be via the portal or via the return of former Sun Devils. The question is, which former Sun Devils are in theory eligible to make a return to Arizona State for a fifth and final season of college football or college basketball? We're going to get into the gridiron guys, the guys that could potentially make a return for Sun Devil football on the other side of our first break. Financial success begins with the right institution and, of course, the right account. So you already know we're talking about Mountain America Credit Union, more specifically that MACU My Style checking account, specifically because it's designed around exceptional member service. And it's far more than just a box of dusty old checks. We've been telling you for quite some time now about the different perks and benefits that come with that My Style checking account. But guys, it's the ultimate spending account and how we get things done, meaning it could be your midday snack account. It could be your NIL investment account, your date night account, your surprise party account. In other words, it is the perfect fill in the blank account. Whatever makes your life worthwhile, well, Mountain America's My Style checking is right there with you. So with so many possibilities, how will you use My Style? Make sure you apply for your My Style checking account at any Mountain America branch or at macu.com/MyStyle, insured by NCUA. Apply for your My Style checking account. Membership required based on eligibility. Some benefits required. No cost registration/activation. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Look, the college football season is right around the corner, and well, the NFL preseason, it starts this week. And what better to take preseason football to the next level than with some Pure Edibles gummies, okay? You can have that Hall of Fame game looking like an actual Super Bowl with the right amount of Pure gummies. My personal favorite part about Pure and their gummies, well, it's that they're not covered in sugar like all of their competitors, but they still taste like candy. That's right, Pure, a full-fledged candy company offering gummies. They've got Kicks, their version of Starburst Chew, soft candies like caramel, and then hard candies as well. Not to mention, they clearly list the effects on each tin so you know exactly what effects you can expect. And hey, if you're somebody that maybe doesn't want to indulge in the uplifting effects of Pure Edibles, but you have a tough time sleeping, make sure you check out Pure's Sleep Support Gummies. Go find yourself some Pure Edibles products from one of the over 150 dispensaries across Arizona, now including Trulieve. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, the 2026 college football season is right around the corner, and we've got some big news. That's right. We are pretty much next up, I think, for PHNX Live, August 27th, over at the Upper Deck at Gila River Resorts and Casinos Wild Horse Pass. That is the show where Rubus and I are going to be dropping the new diss track. We're going to be dropping our season predictions, and that is the official season preview show. August 27th, Wild Horse Pass, free RSVP. All diehards who attend are going to receive a free drink ticket for the event, and that show is going to start at 6 p.m. Again, August 27th. So if you're a PHNX Sun Devils listener, supporter, any chance you get, highly recommend you show up. It is going to be one hell of an evening ahead of that 2026 college football season. So let us know if you are gonna make it. Again, if you have any questions, head on over to gophnx.com/events for more info. But getting back to the new eligibility rulings, and specifically which former Sun Devil football players could make a return to Arizona State in 2026 for one final season. We're going to be discussing these three players: Jordan Crook, Myles Rouser, and Jacob Kungaika. And again, Taylor brought it up. Jordan Crook plays in the CFL. Still TBD on what that CFL contract means in terms of the quote-unquote professional league, how the courts outline it. So, Jordan Crook, what would he mean? What would Myles Rouser, what would Jacob Kungaika mean for Arizona State if they were able to make a return? Well, Jordan Crook, if you remember last season, was a pivotal piece for this Arizona State defense. 96 solo tackles, 52 solo tackles, 101 total tackles on the season last year, an INT, 2 sacks. He was all over the field for Arizona State, somebody that had been a part of this Arizona State roster since that Big 12 championship season. If you remember, transferred over from Arkansas, and he was a staple for this Arizona State defense. Definitely having his best season yet in 2025. Let's say you pick Jordan Crook up and you bring him over from Canada back to Tempe. What this linebacker room looks like immediately is dangerous. You already have the nation's leading tackler from a year ago in Owen Long. Nobody, I think, is as high on Martell Hughes as I am going into another year at Arizona State. I would expect him to get starting level reps. You bring back a player of Zyrus Fiaseu's caliber who missed the majority of last season. Some younger linebackers in that room, right? Prayer Young, Black Goat, to name one of them. Like, there are so many linebackers already in this linebacker room. I think the Sun Devils will jump at the opportunity to get any of these players back. If I'm being honest with you, that's just how good they are, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Crook, getting him back at the linebacker spot next to Owen Long, in rotation with Zyrus Fiaseu, Martell Hughes. What that would mean in terms of bringing back another veteran leader for this team, I think would be monumental for the Arizona State Sun Devils going into a really, really important 2026 season. One thing I will say is I think of all the guys that we're going to talk about for ASU football here over the next 15 to 20 minutes, Jordan Crook, in my eyes, again, as I said earlier, I think is the biggest long shot to return to Arizona State. He does play in the CFL. I still don't fully understand. I don't think a lot of people fully understand what the professional side of things looks like by this court ruling. Is it professional leagues just in the United States? Is it specifically the NBA and NFL? How does that work moving forward? And again, Jordan Crook is a player that did declare for the NFL draft. So what does the declaration mean in terms of his overall standing within this ruling? But regardless, one thing that you cannot overstate is that Jordan Crook in this Arizona State defense would potentially give the Sun Devils one of the best linebacker duos in the Big 12. Having Crook next to Owen Long with a rotation of Martell Hughes and, of course, Zyrus Fiaseu would be monstrous. But moving to the last level of defense for Arizona State, Myles Rouser. Myles Rouser can make a return. He's not somebody that has signed a pro-level contract, did declare for the draft, as all of these NFL guys or all of these former Arizona State football players have done. But Myles Rouser, I want to say on the night of the ruling, actually quote retweeted the On3's post about the ruling. It said, "Ghosts always come back to haunt." Several reports have already gone out that Arizona State safety Myles Rouser is exploring a return to college football. A lot from CBS Sports and other outlets. Myles Rouser could return to Arizona State for another season. What would that mean? What would Myles Rouser's return to Tempe mean for this Arizona State defense? It would be scary. Because you look at the back end of this defense right now, right? Or let's just look at the secondary as a whole. In terms of what you likely have for starters, you have Rodney Bimage, you have Ashton Stamps at corner, and by my estimation, you have Montana Warren at the nickel spot. At safety, you're going to get the Kansas transfer and Lyric Rawls, and you're going to get Boogie Wilson, who stepped up big last season for Arizona State, of course, when Xavier Alford went down. Boogie Wilson spent the majority of his time in 2025 playing alongside Myles Rouser. Two safeties that deliver bone-crushing hits, play in, play out every single drive. They're just that level of player. If you bring back Myles Rouser, I think there's a serious conversation about moving one of your starting safeties, whether that be Lyric or Boogie. My mind says probably more Boogie than Lyric. Does Boogie Wilson then get reps at nickel corner? What does that situation look like for Montana Warren? What does that situation look like for some of the younger DBs that transferred in? Josiah McGrew, for example, right, who transferred in, a really lengthy safety who I think has a lot of athleticism, a high ceiling, a lot of potential, somebody that was likely and is likely to get reps this season at safety, assuming the safety room doesn't add another player of Myles Ghost-Rauser's caliber. But Myles Ghost-Rauser for a fifth year on this Arizona State defense, his fifth year, not his fifth overall year in Tempe, but another season in Tempe would be so fun to watch. It would be truly a special sighting. And Sharon brings up an interesting question saying, could Ghost be a nickel? I think there is a lot to explore there, especially with some of these former players coming back of, okay, why didn't it work, right? Why did Myles Ghost-Rauser not get drafted by an NFL team? Is there a chance that Myles comes back and maybe he adds that level of versatility and plays a little bit more nickel, right? I think that's something that could potentially help his case to go pro next season, right? Or after this 2026 campaign. I think there's a chance that happens, Sharon, that there is a real discussion about Myles Rauser moving to nickel. I think regardless, if Myles Ghost-Rauser is added back on this roster, then I do think there is going to be serious conversation about how you get those three safeties on the field at once, right? Boogie Wilson, Lyric Rawls, the Kansas transfer who's a part of the Pat Tillman Leadership Council now, which tells you everything you need to know. And then Ghost-Rauser. Those are three very high-level safeties. Those are three very hard-hitting safeties, to say the least. I love what they all do in coverage. I think Arizona State's defense is significantly better with Myles Rauser on it than where it stands right now. And again, I'm a big fan of what Arizona State's defense is going to look like in 2026. But there is one other player in contention to potentially return for the Sun Devil football team in 2026, and it could potentially be at the biggest position of need, and that is defensive lineman Jacob Kongaika. Jacob Kongaika is somebody who, I mean, wildly surprised me and I think several others ever since he transferred from U of A to ASU in his contribution. Last year, 23 total tackles, 9 of those solo, 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles, but the things you don't see that Jacob Kongaika brought to Arizona State is the intensity, the energy, and the stoutness in the run game. We've talked long and often on this show this summer about Arizona State's biggest hole on the roster right now likely being the spot next to CJ Fite in the interior of this Sun Devil defense, right? At defensive tackle, you lost Mikael Gardner with an Achilles injury for the season. You had to fill this hole next to CJ Fite, simply because Jacob Kongaika was out of eligibility and he was gone. Now there's the option of, hey, what if Jacob Kongaika comes back for a fifth season, another season of college football? Then you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room in terms of rotation, right? Then you can maybe rotate in a Zach Swanson similar to what you did in that 2024 championship season. Maybe you throw in guys like a Deshaun Morgan, a Julian Hugo kicking into the inside. There, Hiram, right, or Jeffrey Manns. There are so many different players that I personally feel better in terms of like a true rotation than being a 3-down defensive tackle, the way that I believe Jacob Kongaika can come back to Tempe and be alongside a player of CJ Fite's caliber. Sharon says, I heard Kongaika doesn't look likely, but I would love to have him back. Would be huge on the D-line. It would be huge on the D-line. And I think the immediate excitement that you and a lot of just college sports fans got when that ruling came down Friday was, man, like all these guys are going to come back, right? It didn't work out in the NFL, hasn't worked out in the NBA, hasn't worked out in whatever league. They're going to come back. They're going to be Sun Devils again. They're going to be, playing for whoever. And we get to see them one last time. It's going to give us more depth. It's going to give us more star power. It's going to fill all the holes on the roster, and it's going to be great. But I think one thing that does get lost here is these guys had senior day, right? These guys made the decision to leave, to be done, to be on to the next chapter of college or on to the next chapter of, their lives, professional sports for a lot of them. So I think it is a tall task for some of them to make that jump back down to college football when that is something in your mind that you have already kind of seen pass you by. You closed that book entirely. Just because you have the option to open it again doesn't necessarily mean that all of these guys are going to take, that opportunity. Kangaika is an interesting one, right? Because it fills the positional need that this team has. Crook is an interesting one because it's, maybe the deepest room on the defense is linebacker. Do you add another player of that caliber back? Ghost Rouser is a fascinating one too, because then it gives you a third safety that you know what they bring in terms of game-by-game play, in terms of reps, in terms of versatility, in terms of just overall, ferocity, right? All these players are very, very interesting in consideration for Arizona State. And I will say I have made a prediction on which one I think is most likely to return, which we will go ahead and reveal for you guys at the tail end of today's show. Taylor with another $2 super chat. Appreciate you throwing these super chats in there. Taylor saying, would they have to take classes? I hate classes. No, Taylor, they would not have to take classes. If they've already graduated with their degree, they get their eligibility. We've seen this a number of times where athletes will actually graduate early and still play multiple seasons of college athletics. So they don't have to worry about taking classes at that point. Now, they can, of course, start another degree if that's something that they wanted to do, or a certificate or anything along those lines. Glenn says, want to hear something good, funny? I think Cam Rising is class of 2022. Cam Rising has already used up all of his eligibility. I will fly to Utah myself and ensure that Cam Rising does not step on the field. How will I do it? Well, I'll just take him out to a really nice dinner, and I'll prohibit him from, playing football in 2026. I'm not going to do anything drastic, but Cam Rising cannot play football. He cannot be allowed to play football again, at least at the college level. If he wants to go play in the CFL, be my guest. You want to go try and play in the NFL? Sure, it's not going to happen, but give it a shot. Cam Rising is done in college football, and that is important to note. But ASU football, not the only program that could return some high-level contributors. Randy Bennett's squad also in contention to return maybe a handful of Sun Devils. We're going to let you know who's available on the other side of our second break. The AZ heat is here to stay, and, windows, they are a major reason for those costs climbing every single month. Of course, heating the house and costing you money to cool down your space. So maybe it's time to get some new windows, because new windows can actually lower your energy bill instantly. We're, of course, talking about our friends over at the Window Depot. I can't believe it, but we are already in August. So if at any point last year or throughout 2026 you told yourself, well, hey, it's time for that home renovation, that makeover, you're trying to spruce up your space, 2026, the end of it is right around the corner. So go check out our friends over at the Window Depot. Way more than just a window store. Whether you need windows, doors, cabinets, countertops, the list goes on and on. And of course, our friends over at the Window Depot, they have you covered. So make sure you visit thewindowdepot.com and get started on your next project today. Stop by one of the Window Depot's 8 Arizona locations and see for yourself why they're way more than just a window store. Shop online, pick up in store, browse and order directly at thewindowdepot.com with real-time access to in-stock products at your nearest location. Get what you need when you need it. Look, if you are a regular viewer or listener of not only the PHNX Sun Devils Show, but any show here at PHNX Sports, we want to hear from you. All you got to do, take a short survey, let us know what you love and how we can be better here at PHNX. And of course, this isn't a free thing for you guys. Of course, all we ask is you take the 3-minute survey, and in return, you guys are going to have a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Of course, if you're watching PHNX Sun Devils, you're somebody with great taste and impeccable judgment. So head on over to gophnx.com/feedback today to get signed up. Again, it takes about 3 minutes, and your feedback is going to shape what we do around here. So take the survey today. Head to gophnx.com/feedback. That's gophnx.com/feedback. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Will diving into basketball, saying getting a true point guard to run the floor with all the big guys, absolute cinema. Bring Moe back and let him feed the trees. Glenn says, I think the other dude could feed better than Odum, talking about Joel Foxwell, the Portland State transfer point guard for Arizona State. But let's go ahead and take a look at the players in contention to return to Tempe for one final season in 2026. If you look in the top right there, you will see, of course, that list headlined by Moe Odum, Anthony Pig Johnson, and Alan Mukeba could all technically return to Arizona State for one final season. Before we talk about the guy here, which is Moe Odum, let's go ahead and talk about the other two. The two, in my mind, less likely options to return under Randy Bennett's team this season, starting with Alan Mukeba, right? Last year, 5.5 points, 3.5 boards for Alan Mukeba. Was somebody that did have his moments as a true contributor for Bobby Hurley's team, but I think when we're talking about bringing back Alan Mukeba to ASU in the same way that we were talking about returning Jordan Crook, Myles Rouser, and Jacob Kangaiker for football, I think you have to look at the fit, right? Does Alan Mukeba fit right now if you just added him to this Arizona State roster? I would say no. I don't believe that Alan Mukeba really fits what Randy Bennett has in Tempe. I do not see them utilizing that last roster spot for another forward, right? They already have a lot of size on this team going into 2026. I think last year you could have made the argument that the reason Alan Mukeba was instrumental at times, again, at times, I say that loosely, is because he was 6'8", 250 pounds, right? He was a bigger guy on that team, not a bigger guy on this version of Arizona State. He does not shoot the ball well. He is, in theory, an average rebounder when you look at the numbers. So I think Alan Mukeba, although he can come back, I do not envision Alan Mukeba being an Arizona State Sun Devil in 2026. Thus, meaning, again, I don't believe he entered the portal during that window, which would mean his college eligibility is, in theory, done, right? Now, there are two other options that are pretty exciting, right, when you think about it. Let's talk about Anthony Pig Johnson. Pig Johnson in 2025 for Arizona State was maybe the most random bucket getter, highlight creator that Bobby Hurley's team saw a year ago, right? Somebody that averaged, 13 points a game, 3 total rebounds, nearly 2 assists, shot 45% from the floor. Not great from 3, right? 32%, just under 33 total percent from three-point land. But Anthony Pig Johnson was somebody, as a guard, a true 2 in my mind, that could get you a bucket when you needed it. Wasn't always consistent, wasn't always pretty, but you knew that Pig Johnson was going to give you 110% on both sides of the court, right? Offensively and defensively. And I think with there being such an emphasis for Randy Bennett's squad this season on being able to play fundamental basketball, being able to lock it up on offense and defense, offensively, working it around until you get the best shot, and defensively kind of doing, the same thing just on the defensive end. I think Pig Johnson would be fascinating for Arizona State at the 2-guard spot. Somebody that is smaller when you look at just the way this roster now is constructed, right? He is 6'3", but this is a team that has, in my mind, players that have the length and the athleticism that Pig Johnson already brought, right? They've got a player of Dylan Shaw's caliber that is bigger. He's probably going to play the 3, right? I want to say Dylan Shaw's like 6'7". Emmanuel Innocenti is a very, very interesting player as well, the transfer from Gonzaga. Like, you have players at a bigger size, probably less money than you'd have to pay Pig Johnson to return to Tempe. Not to mention the thing that makes Pig Johnson's return the least likely of any of these guys is Pig Johnson did indeed already enter the portal. He entered the portal when he needed to, thus meaning that Pig Johnson can explore his opportunities elsewhere. That makes it a long shot for me for Pig Johnson to actually return to Arizona State in 2026. We've got one final player to discuss for ASU men's basketball. The mentor says Totri has a high ceiling with his career. He'll move on and make money. The two clowns, I mean, come on, man. Come on. I love Damon. I love Kevin. While U of A is a circus, those two, they're not clowns. Only when it comes to blind ranking. But those are two really, really good dudes. 1,000%. As is the last guy we're going to talk about that could potentially join forces with Randy Bennett at Arizona State. And that is point guard Moe Odum. I mean, Moe Odum, just take a bow. Take a bow for what that 2025 season was, right? Undersized. Nobody thought that this guy could do it at a Big 12 level, and he was at times, maybe not even at times, maybe the whole season, he was the best player for the Arizona State Sun Devils in 2025. He was the most consistent player for Arizona State in 2025. He ran the offense that Bobby Hurley gave him at a high level. Was the offense itself high level? Not even a little bit. But Moe Odum could return to Arizona State. Now, Moe Odum, despite what was previously reported, didn't enter the transfer portal when he needed to. So if Moe Odum was going to return to college basketball, it would be in Tempe, to my understanding. Moe last season for Arizona State averaged 16.4 points per game, three rebounds, nearly 6 assists, shot from a 40% clip from the field, 37% from three-point land. Now, we talked about the fit earlier, right? Doesn't make sense for Alan Mukeba realistically to come back to Arizona State, or I should say it doesn't make sense for Randy Bennett to add Alan Mukeba to this roster. Pig Johnson is an interesting one again, but he's already in the portal, more of a 2 than a true 1. If you look at Arizona State's current makeup that they have of this roster, I think there is great size. I think it's one of the tallest, longest teams that you are going to see in college basketball this season, with the 7-footers that they have, with the size of their 2s and their 3s, right? Like we mentioned, Dylan Shaw's 6'7", Innocenti, I want to say, is 6'5". Like, there is a lot of length on this Arizona State basketball team. What there isn't a lot of on this Arizona State basketball team is distributors. Joel Foxwell, in my view, is the only true point guard that Randy Bennett has going into this 2026 season. I don't know what the vision is for J. Rob Croy. I don't know if that is your point guard in waiting. He's a bigger guard. I don't know if he's more a traditional 2, or how Randy Bennett and that staff view J. Rob Croy, especially going into 2026 as a true freshman, what that looks like, right? Moe Odum, though, if he were to return to Arizona State, fits beautifully with what you want to do on the offensive side of the ball, right? Offensively, you want somebody that can orchestrate this offense, that can pass it around, get guys in the right spot, and find the best shot on the court. He gives you a little bit more of a three-point presence than you currently have on the roster, right? That's something that Eric and I have discussed numerous times on this show over the summer since Randy Bennett got to Arizona State and this roster has kind of played out and been constructed, is that there aren't a lot of true, proven three-point shooters on this team, right? There are a lot of guys that you can talk about that can shoot the three ball. Do they shoot it well? Not necessarily. Do they shoot it consistently? Not even a little bit, right? Moe Odum at least brings that back. He fits the bill with, again, a need at a point guard spot. The question then would be, does Randy Bennett see that as the immediate need for Arizona State? Do you go add Moe Odum simply because you need a point guard, or do you go look around what is available in the portal? There are far more players available in the men's college basketball portal than there are the college football portal when it comes to this situation, at least in my estimation, right? So do you go explore what's available in the portal and just say, hey, I'm going to go get the best available player? Or do you go get Moe Odum, who proved he could do it at this level with this team, and you bring him in potentially as your starting point guard or as a backup rotational point guard with Joel Foxwell, right? Now, the one thing I do think is worth discussing here is Moe Odum is a smaller guard, right? He's listed at 6'2". I don't know how accurate 6'2" is for Moe Odum. I think he's closer to 6 foot, 6'1". He has a smaller guard, and he's light. He's listed at 160 pounds, right? Versus a player of Joel Foxwell, who is small, but I want to say he's about $180, $190, right? So he's filled out a little bit more than Moe Odum is. I think it gives you a lot of, a lot more flexibility with the roster to know that you have somebody that can orchestrate an offense when Joel Foxwell isn't in the game. But I do think potentially the addition leaves you vulnerable on the defensive side of the ball at times. I wouldn't sit here and pretend to say that Moe Odum is the best defensive player in the Big 12, right? Especially considering that this team for Arizona State under Randy Bennett's tutelage in 2026, I think is going to be a very, it's going to be a top level defense in the Big 12, or at least a top 5, top 6 defense in the Big 12. Again, my prediction, my estimation here, I think other places would tell you that that's ludicrous or that Arizona State belongs maybe in the 8, 9, 10 spot. I think defensively is where Arizona State is really going to hang its hat, right? Sean in the chat says, who is the best point guard available in the portal? Glenn says, best point guard in the portal at this point? Probably Odum. Well, again, Odom's not in the portal, so that is not necessarily something that factors in here. And again, Sean, it's tough to answer that with this ruling coming down just 3 days ago because not everybody has made a decision on whether or not they're returning. So players can return that are in the portal, and then you can go from there and we can evaluate it. But I think as this whole thing starts to play out, we will definitely do shows specific to what is the best option for both football and, of course, for men's basketball. But Moe Odum, I think, is a fascinating piece for Arizona State if they were to bring him back. Like Glenn says, it's our best option and tailor-made for us. In a sense, yeah, it kind of is. The question, I think, is more so, does Randy Bennett want Moe Odum to return? I believe that Moe Odum does want to return to Arizona State in 2026. The question is he who I predicted will return to Tempe? I predicted one football player and one basketball player to return to Arizona State in 2026. We're going to give you the predictions on the other side of our final break. Look, everybody is trying to savor what's left of summer with a vacation. Well, how about you stay in town and you have yourself a lovely staycation over at Gila River Resorts and Casinos? Any of their locations will do. Of course, we're biased to Wild Horse Pass because so many of our PHNX events are over at that Wild Horse Pass location. But seriously, whether you are with family, friends, or anybody else, Gila River Resorts and Casinos, they have something for you. Whether you want to check out the gaming floor, take your chance at winning some money, or maybe you just want to catch whatever big game is going on, you could do that at any of their sports books. Or maybe you want to hang out by the pool. If you want to just stay in a nice luxury suite, order room service, maybe get out, have a nice steak dinner, doesn't matter, because over at Gila River Resorts and Casinos, they've got everything that you could possibly want. So Gila River Resorts and Casinos, remember, it's all the ways that you do you. Visit playathila.com for more details. We are less than 35 days from everybody, and I mean everybody here in the Valley, packing into Mountain America Stadium, watching Arizona State football take on Morgan State. And I think one thing that I'm most excited for is I'm most excited to see how many branded Bills hats are at Mountain America Stadium this season. There were so many last year, and I know they've got so many different options for Sun Devil fans. Just check out the Branded Bills website, type in Sun Devils into the search bar, and you guys are going to see 90 plus different Sun Devil specific Arizona State hats that you can sport for the start of the college football season. Doesn't matter if you've got a specific style, because whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, they've got you covered with performance, style, and a big one here in 2026, affordability. So head on over to brandedbills.com and use code BBPHNX15 for 15% off your first order. Taylor in the chat, Will, Glenn, Sean, and so many more. Sharon, KD, all of you, we appreciate you being here live, watching after the fact, or listening on audio. Do us one small favor. We got like 50 of you guys in here, only 13 likes. If you guys could do us that favor and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to PHNX Sports, and drop a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Again, fall camp kicking off for Arizona State football this week. We are going to have you covered over at practice, in the studio, and everywhere. gearing up for that 2026 college football season. Taylor in the chat says, Sorsby's betting Rouser and Odom come back. Sorsby knows. We will see. We did have a question, I want to say potentially from Taylor, or no, from Glenn in the chat saying, does this 5-for-5 rule affect baseball and hockey? I imagine baseball less because of minor leagues. So again, to my understanding, this is eligibility for every college athlete in class of 2022. Baseball, softball, hockey, wrestling. If you played it at ASU or you played it in college, and you're a class of 2022 athlete that hasn't signed a pro contract, you're able to come back. Again, some of these rosters are filled out and they don't have spots saved for you. I think you are going to run into a space where teams and coaches are going to have to make decisions on whether or not they cut players, which, like we said off the top of the show, is going to lead to some very controversial things, I think, when it comes to college athletics. Over the next several weeks as you get closer and closer to the actual start of the college football season. But yes, those players can return as well. Specifically, ASU softball is a program to look at when it comes to this whole situation. ASU women's basketball is another very, very interesting one as well. But look, we talked about this eligibility ruling, what it means specifically for Arizona State. We went through 3 players for football that could potentially make a return. Jordan Crook, Jacob Kongaika, Myles Rouser. We talked basketball, Moe Odum, Pig Johnson, and Alan Mukeba. And I've got 2 guys that I think, honestly, you could end up seeing back in maroon and gold in 2026. So if you see him at the airport, let him know we're here. We're looking for Myles, Ghost, Rouser, and Moe Odum to potentially return to Tempe in 2026. We talked about Moe Odum. It might be the cleanest fit that you can get of any of the guys that we talked about today. Fills a position of need. Whether that means he's a starter or a rotational piece is definitely TBD. But this team needs a point guard outside of Joel Foxwell, who, again, got a lot of confidence in. Excited to see Joel Foxwell in 2026, but another point guard would certainly help Randy Bennett's squad. And then when we're talking about Kenny Dillingham and the Arizona State Sun Devils on the gridiron, I like Myles Rouser as a potential player to come back. Again, Jacob Kongaika is maybe a better fit in terms of what you need, right? You need a D tackle in my eyes. Jordan Crook's a long shot because he's playing in Canada. Myles Ghost Rouser is somebody that hasn't signed a pro contract. He is already exploring his options, and he has expressed interest in returning to Arizona State in 2026. What that would mean for the ASU secondary, the ASU defense, the ASU locker room in general, I think is certainly something that would help this team, would help the program going into, again, a wildly important 2026 season. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from the chat on which player, let's say, again, out of the 6 that we brought up, pick one. Pick one player that you want to see most return to Arizona State in 2026. Let us know in the chat. Already got a couple answers. Sean says Ghost and Odom. Go Devils. Again, Teller is predicting Rouser and Odom when it comes down to this whole situation. Let us know. Let us know who you think Arizona State could use, whether it be for Randy Bennett on the hardwood or for Kenny Dillingham on the football field. Teller says Kongaika is who he would pick. Again, I think Kongaika would be a great option. Unfortunately, Glenn Spencer Torkelson can't come back. He is long gone from college athletics. Somebody that was just an absolute, bomb getter, if you will. Is that something that we can roll with?
Yeah, we can roll with that. I got a question for you, though.
Yeah.
Who do you think out of Ghost and Moe Odum would make the most impact if they were to come back? Because my thought with Odum is Randy Bennett's got like a whole new squad. It might help to get one more guy that kind of knows his way around campus a little bit.
Yeah.
But then Ghost is just a dog that having another guy like that back is huge. So what do you think?
Just overall impact. Oh, man. I think, in all honesty, I think I would go with Ghost. I think I would go with Ghost. And again, I love Moe, but I think there is so many new faces on this ASU men's basketball team that maybe there would be some issues with chemistry. And again, like you said, I think having somebody that was at ASU last year, like the Bryce Fords of the world, I think that would be beneficial to some of the new guys. But when it comes to football, Ghost has been here multiple seasons at this point in time. I think he's a well-respected player in that locker room already. I think Moe would have to kind of earn that again because it's such a new roster. And I think in terms of like who could almost, impact their career the most, I think Ghost. I think Moe is unfortunately kind of capped at how the NBA views him because he's a smaller guard. But I think Ghost put a lot of great stuff on tape. And if he came back and showed the versatility, I think that would be monstrous. And again, if you can add another player to the secondary, considering you're going to be seeing A&M, BYU, Tech, like it would be, I think, super, super helpful for ASU. Who would you pick, though?
I think it's Ghost for the same reason, too. I think Moe, like him coming back would be cool because like the same thing I said, like he knows his way around campus and whatnot, but he doesn't know his way around the roster anymore, or the coaching staff. Like it's basically coming in as a new transfer to the same school, basically, it's a big difference than, like you're saying, Ghost coming back with the same group, same coaches, all that stuff, knows exactly where he needs to be. So, yeah, I'd say Ghost for me as well.
Sharon says, personally, Ghost. Kangaika is most needed, though. Sean says maybe there will be another DT that becomes available in the new portal. Yeah, that is also something that's out there. Again, these guys that entered the portal, football is a little bit weirder of a situation when it comes to the portal. But again, if there are players out there and this portal window exists, like Arizona State has the option to do so. But again, to my understanding, Arizona State's football roster is capped, meaning that they have filled their spots. They would have to cut players to add players. I don't know what Kenny Dillingham's philosophy is on that with fall camp starting this week. That would be that'd be a brutal look to have to cut a player so that you could bring back one. But again, college football, college athletics, it's the Wild West at this point in time. So we will see. It is definitely going to be a fun one, and it's going to be a situation that we are going to continue to monitor. So make sure you follow the PHNX Sun Devils Show on Instagram, Twitter, and on TikTok at PHNX_Sun Devils. You can follow me at Anthony_Totri. You can follow the Freckle Mamba on social at, come on, guys, the Freckle Mamba. Like, we've been at this now for quite some time. We will, of course, be back on Tuesday with a full fall camp preview. In the meantime, go Devils. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.